When you look back at 2018, it was an interesting year for the Ravens organization. First and foremost, you knew it was Ozzie Newsome's last as the general manager and basically overall football god for the Baltimore Ravens. You had a feeling that 2018, with the selection of Lamar Jackson with the last pick in round number one after they made the move up the board to go get him, that 2018 could represent the end of the Joe Flacco era. And lo and behold, it ultimately did come to pass that way. Flacco got hurt in the middle of the season. Lamar Jackson came in. The Ravens customized and changed their offense to fit the talent of the quarterback. Imagine that. What a novel concept. And they end up getting into the playoffs and, kind of laid an egg for the first 3+ quarters against the Chargers in the wild card round before Lamar caught it into a good rhythm, got a little bit of momentum going, and the Ravens made a game of it at the end. Heading into 2019, no more Ozzie Newsome, no more Joe Flacco. It's now Lamar Jackson's show. His team went out in the offseason, made a big splash signing by bringing over Earl Thomas, formerly of the Seattle Seahawks. And you sit there and you say to yourself, okay, that's a big time move, trying to get a difference maker in the back end of that secondary. Now let's take a look and see what's going to happen in year 2 of Lamar Jackson's development. And even though you got off to a 2-2 start, you could see Lamar Jackson was poised to do some big move for this team. Obviously, was the early season trade for Marcus Peters away from the Los Angeles Rams. While I thought he was only so-so with the Rams, he certainly was a lot better with the Ravens. But as the season progressed past that first quarter of the year, the whole thing changed for the Ravens. They got hot. Needless to say, they got hot. From the beginning of the year, you saw some potential possibility even in that Dolphins game, but you looked at that game and you said, okay, maybe that's just because the Dolphins are taking and they're really just that bad. Things can't be this good for the Baltimore Ravens. Well, yeah, they were. They ended up winning the last 12 games in a row of the regular season, getting the number 1 overall seed in the AFC playoffs. Like that real moment where you really, really had to take them serious for reals is when they beat the brakes off of the Patriots on Sunday night in the middle of the year. Once they did that, you said, holy crap, this team could be onto something. And really, the Lamar Jackson experience just took over. How crazy it is. Another young quarterback coming in and just wrecking the league in his first true full season as a starter. 36 touchdown passes, only 6 interceptions, over 1,200 rushing yards, a single season quarterback rushing record. It's not a surprise after the Ravens went 14-2 and Lamar Jackson had this historic type of season that he ended up being the NFL's most valuable player. And they rode him as far as they could. Mark Ingram, who they brought in over in free agency from the Saints, came in and he did big things, over 1,000 yards, over 5 yards a carry. Defense played an elite level statistically, 6th against the pass, 5th against the run, 4th in total yards allowed. And you're looking at this team and you're saying, is that bubble going to burst or can they really go the distance? At least maybe get to the AFC Championship game so we could see Lamar Jackson versus Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson. No matter what happened, that could be exciting. But sometimes you see this happen where a team has a really, really good regular season and they get really, really, really hot. And the worst thing that can happen at that time is to get some time off. You see this happen all the time with a 1 or 2 seed in the NFC or AFC playoffs. This is one of them a year, if not more, that comes off of that bye with that 2 weeks to rest, and especially for the Ravens where they rested Lamar, some of the starters in week 17, you could effectively say maybe 3 weeks of rest. And it's rust, it's something like the chemistry, the flow just isn't the same because they came out in that divisional round game against the Titans and they got smoked. They got smoked. The offense had a really bad day. Lamar Jackson in particular had a pretty brutal bad day. Now you're talking about the second straight year that he didn't perform up to standards in the playoffs is going to start giving him a bit of a label as a guy. And I certainly would hate to see that because I talk about a guy that was a league MVP, 14-2. He's only in his second year in the league. It's a little early to put the choker label on him. If it continues to happen over the years, it could become a bigger issue. It's something the organization is going to have to solve for. But they also could have solved for the defense on that day, because even if Lamar was better, it might not have mattered. The Titans got up early, and then once they got up early, the Ravens not really suited for that type of style of football, having to score big explosive points in the passing game down the field in a hurry. Now the Titans can sit there and just pound Derrick Henry down their throats, and that's exactly what happened. So for a Ravens team, 14-2, league MVP, all this great will and everything else happening, and they get bounced at home in the divisional round in kind of embarrassing fashion. It was really, really tough for the Ravens. But you've got to say, if you're the Ravens, the future looks bright. Even if you expect Lamar Jackson to take some type of step back from the performance he put up in the 2019 regular season, the kid is still really, really, really good and could get even better as a passer as he goes into year 3 of his career. And if you follow the progression of, let's say, the Kansas City Chiefs, even though you're a different team, different situation, different environment, I grant you, the Chiefs, in Patrick Mahomes' first year as a starter, made it to the AFC Championship game. Heartbreaking overtime loss to the Patriots. Next year they come back. It's not quite the same. Mahomes got hurt with the knee injury, missed just a small bit of time. But the team got right at the right time, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. Maybe Ravens fans could be hopeful that the same thing could happen to them in 2020. I don't know. We shall see. In terms of the offseason, they got about $30 million in salary cap space, which for a team that's pretty close doesn't seem like that bad. Sure, you would like more, but you're certainly not up against it. The problem is you got guys you got to worry about trying to resign. Got to worry about guys like Matt Judon and Tony Jefferson and Jimmy Smith, Matt Skora, Michael Pierce, blah, blah, blah. There's only so much money to go around. It's always interesting to me with the Ravens that, this is a team that always seems to be in a limited salary cap type of space, but yet and still they don't spend a ton of big splashy money in free agency. Sure, there's an Eric Weddle signing or a Earl Thomas signing here and there, but it always fascinated to me. It seems like so many of the really good or great players that they draft and they develop, they end up losing, and I just wonder where the hell all the money goes. The good thing for the Ravens, though, is when you look at this team, and even when you look at the salary cap situation, you got to try and go all in now, especially with Lamar on his rookie deal that you could potentially bump out eventually to a 5th-year option. You got 3 more years up to that much of a really team-friendly contract for an MVP caliber type of quarterback. As a result, if you're going to go up against the cap, now is the time to do it. And the Ravens need to do it. A little more help on offense, a little more help maybe on the defensive side of the ball, because it certainly did not look good in the divisional round against the Titans. But this is the time for them to be aggressive, and that even includes in the NFL draft. And you got the 28th pick in round number 1, and they got their normal slot assortment of draft picks. I can't remember if they'll get any compensatory picks, whatever. But if you're the Ravens and you get a hankering for one of those big-time wide receivers in this draft class, whether it be a CeeDee Lamb or whether it's a Henry Ruggs or maybe a Jerry Jeudy, if you got to go up and trade up to go get one of those guys to pair next to Hollywood Brown to give more help to Lamar Jackson, then that's what the hell you do. If you want to go out in free agency and you say, hey, Marshall Yanda's probably at the end of his rope, we need to upgrade an offensive guard, find a long-term replacement for him, spend some money, that's what you do. If you say, hey, we need to go find some linebackers in free agency or via the draft, and we got to target, that's what you do. You don't want to waste these opportunities. In terms of their team needs, I've thought for a while guard was a need because you knew Marshall Yanda's coming to the end of it, and I really think it's a huge need for them now. Still think they need some help at wide receiver. You invested the first-round pick in Hollywood Brown last year, I grant you, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't necessarily invest an early pick in the wide receiver class this year. I know you drafted Brown and Miles Boykin, but this wide receiver class in 2020 is really, 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 really good. Doesn't mean you have to spend a first-round pick on him. You could probably find a guy that could contribute immediately in rounds 2, 3, or 4. But for the Ravens, with their defense, which has been so heavily based on what you could do at the edge rushers and at the linebacking position. They could certainly, I think, use some help there, both inside and outside. They've lost some guys there, and especially if they don't retain Matthew Judon, then they're going to need an edge rusher. I look to this Ravens team right now, and I would anticipate and expect they're going to get a lot of Super Bowl buzz for 2020. And the way it stands right now, I could certainly understand why.